give me one shot here on a blue chip stock, believe me, Kevin, the only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Nobody knows if the stock is going to go up, down, sideways, or in circles.
What's going on, NBA draft fans? Your boys are back. The Wolves of Ball Street, your favorite draft analyst. My name is Corey Tulaba, and I am here today with my dude, Stephen Gillespie, back from the depths of the ocean, like the aliens around, filling in for my guy, Albert Garbage Time Gim, who will be back soon on the show. Albert is out in LA, so a lot of life stuff, dealing with, the fires. His family, is all good, but life is hectic because of that. So we got Steven filling in today. So Steven, appreciate you coming by to chop it up, man. It's been a while since we got to do this one-on-one. So what's going on? How we feeling? How's life?
Man, first off, big shouts to Albert. I'm glad that he and his family are doing okay. Continued prayers and, just positive energy going his way. But Corey, dude, it's awesome to be able to chop it up with you. I think this is the first time that you and I have done anything this cycle since we were doing draft stuff. So I always love getting to chop it up with you, man, because I feel like, we see things in different ways, and I learn a lot from you. Like, you're one of the OGs to me in the draft space. So anytime I get to chop it up with you, man, it's a good time, man. How's everything with you?
Man, life is hectic at the moment. I'm coaching. Our season is, we have 4 games left, and they're kind of all must win at this point. But we got some really talented guys who are really putting it together. Guys who I've been with forever, so I'm excited to see them play well. And besides that, we're in the middle of the draft season. I got my son, who's newborn baby stuff, how that goes. You were telling me about that when we were in a Airbnb in Atlanta, had an OTE event. So but everything's great, man. And getting to chop it up finally. It's been a few weeks for me on the pod to be back talking NBA draft, not just behind a screen. Well, we're behind a screen, but not typing with our fingers, but actually chopping it up and having dialogue is awesome, because I'm locked into the No Ceilings podcast every day, and I'm hearing you and Maxwell and Tyler and Tyler and Nick and the whole squad that Nick is bringing through, and I'm like, I feel like we're having that conversation because you guys are all my friends, but like I'm not getting to say my piece. So I'm excited to I wanted to jump through the speakers when you and Maxwell were talking about our guy Tahad Pettiford the other day, man. So I'm excited to chop it up with you.
I felt your presence. You had my back, man.
I know. I was like, but what about this? So I'm excited to chop it up with you, because likewise, man, like, you're one of my favorite scouts, and I love that you always have a unique perspective, because at one part of the draft cycle, obviously, it's earlier this year than it has been the last few years. But you just go black for a few months, and then you come back, and you have this unique perspective of not having to deal with the flavor of the week prospect and like the dialogue on who's killing it, who's not. You just can come in with a clear mind. And I think that perspective is necessary a lot of times, because it prevents you from kind of falling into the narrative, which I think is something that we all can be guilty of at times. So super happy to chop it up with you. I think we have a fun episode. I could feel the military man in you with how structured you are. You're like, I'm gonna write out a plan for the show. Me and Albert, we just we free ball this thing, like we have our structure and we go. You're like, I'm gonna write an outline, and I can't let you down,
dude. I can't not have an outline, or I will just this episode would go a million different ways if I didn't have something to keep me straight.
Well, you know what? A little bit of me, a little bit of you. Maybe it'll go in a few different directions. That's what we're here for. Let's get into the first segment. So here's what we're doing. For everybody who is watching live on YouTube, on Twitter/X, this episode is called "Sell Me This Pen," and what I asked Steven to do was provide me with his top 20, which, I had worked to update his top 20. Because if you have a subscription, No Ceilings Plus, you have access to Steven's top 20 /top probably 400 at this point. You have access to my extended board, and we are taking our top 20, looking for 3 prospects each that we are going to ask the other person to sell us on. And as you know, on this show, the NBA Draft Show, formerly the Draft Act, one of the key segments is the Sell Me This Pen segment, where we kind of give an elevator pitch. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to give each other an elevator pitch on 3 specific prospects that we both picked for each other. And then we're going to kind of chop it up and go a little bit deeper into those prospects, and why maybe I don't believe in that prospect as much, or why, maybe Steven will convince me, and vice versa. So that's kind of the plan. That's the format. Segment 1, according to Steven, selling large cap stocks, part 1. We have, Steven, you're the guest. I'm going to let you go first. I picked this player for a couple of reasons. One, because you wrote about him for NoCeilingsNBA.com, so I thought it would be topical. And 2, I'm a big fan as well, but I believe that you have him the highest out of anybody within the No Ceiling squad. We're going to talk about Colin Murray-Boyles. He's number 13 on the No Ceilings collective board. Where is Colin Murray-Boyles on your board?
Can I just real quick, as a new dad, I'm sure you'll appreciate this. My son, Trevor Gillespie, is in the chat right now and just said, "Hey dad, that's me." First time this ever happened. Shout out to Trevor. He's my oldest, man. That's awesome. Thank you, son. I love you. All right. Back to the show. Colin Murray-Boyles is actually 6th on my big board right now.
Okay.
And Corey, I don't know how you're kind of feeling about your filter, your philosophy as you're applying it to this year's draft class. I'm valuing obviously skill, but like physicality, like being able to come to an NBA team and make an instant contribution is something that I'm really kind of high on this year. And that's one of the biggest reasons why Colin Murray-Boyles is a guy that's so high on my board, kind of relative to consensus.
Look, man, I'm here for it. I don't hate it. I've liked Colin for 2 years, would have had him in the lottery for 2 years. I loved him coming out of high school. I remember scouting a bunch of other dudes, and I remember texting Maxwell before he was a freshman. I was like, "Yo, you watch this Murray-Boyles kid?" And he's like, "Oh, like kind of like the pudgy one." I was like, "Yeah, but he's super skilled." He's like, he's fun. So I've liked his game for a minute. And I can see it. I love that you value the physicality, for sure. I remember going to a Knicks game last year, and I'm a New Yorker.
Right.
Look, I could go to Brooklyn Nets games for like $2 if I wanted to, quite literally the other day I looked it up, and Long Island Nets G League tickets were more expensive than the Brooklyn Nets game that was on the same night. But Brooklyn is kind of like annoying to get into. It's, there's a reason that the energy doesn't flow into that building like it does in MSG. So, but I was lucky enough to sit really close at MSG for a Knicks game. Now I'm at, MSG a lot for, scouting the college games, but it's, Knicks game's different. It's not as easy to cover it as media when you're a draft guy, and tickets are like $1,000 if you want to sit in like a decent seat. So I was sitting close, and I just remember going, "Oh my God, Kawhi, James Harden, Julius Randle." I was like, these dudes are strong, man. Like strong. So I think that strength is, one of the more undervalued attributes when you put it alongside, a lot of the other stuff. But give me, outside of the strength, give me your pitch for CMB. Sell me this pen on CMB being a potential borderline top 5 player in this class.
Well, so obviously the physicality, but if you look, he is just good at a lot of different things. And I wrote about that actually on my piece over at NoCeilingsNBA.com. It's 100% free. Go check it out. I wrote about all the different ways that CMB can impact the game. And we all kind of know obviously he's a big man. I'm seeing everyone in the chat. Yes, he is an undersized kind of a big, right? But if you look at the way that he plays, especially against other bigs in the SEC, he is so quick and nimble on his feet. Not only is he strong, but he has tremendous footwork. He is able to kind of get you in the mid post, the high post. He can play along the perimeter. He's going to be a dangerous DHO option on whatever team that he ends up being on. Like, he can have an offense flow through him. And yes, South Carolina as a team was playing really well against Florida. According to Norm Rad in the chat, they just blew that game. It wasn't because of CMB. CMB was actually having probably the best passing game of his young basketball career. Last I looked, he had like 7 assists. So not only does he have a knack for scoring the ball, but he has always had flashes of passing the ball like really well. And he's actually stringing that along. Now, I know a lot of people are going to point to, there's a lot of debate about, film versus, stats and analytics and stuff like that. If you look at the 3-point shot right now, Corey, like the percentages suggest that he's just not going to be able to shoot. But when I turn on the film and I've watched him, like I've tracked all, I think like 16.
Hit one today.
He hit one today. I've tracked all 16 of his 3-point attempts prior to today. He's only had what I would classify as like 2 bad misses. One of them was an air ball. The other one was like 3 seconds left on the shot clock, forced a shot. All the other ones were like online, like good shot grouping and all of that. So aside from the shooting, he is a great playmaker. He is able to face up big men, take them off of the bounce. And then defensively, he's going to be a good help side defender. And I actually trust him a little bit in space as well. I mean, if you look at the analytics, he's got a 4% block percentage, over 3% steal percentage, and he just is super active. Good hands, defending the pick and roll on switches. He does the whole, even when I'm going to recover down to the diving guy, I'm going to put my hands up and make the passing angle as difficult as possible. Dives on the floor, hustles, rebounds his heart out. I mean, this guy is just all over the court in a bunch of different areas. And when I see a player who is as physical as he is, who is as strong as he is, and athletic, and affects that many areas of the game and moves like an NBA player, it's hard for me to deny how impactful he's going to be at the next level. So, Corey, I don't know how good of a job. I know that you like him, but selling him as a pin, in my opinion, is super easy because he just does so many good things on a basketball court.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that the NBA is good at developing that 3-point shot to at least look, our defense is going to panic when he's out there. No, they're not going to panic, right? We're probably never going to panic for him as a shooter, but do I think he's going to be capable of at least making defenses pay if they decide that they want to sag off him a little bit? I do. But as you also mentioned, like the fact that he is a guy who is going to be like a HO threat, like you still can't sag off of him all that much because he's a big burly dude who sets good screens. And if you have a really deadly shooter coming off a DHO and you're the big and you're just playing off of him, well, you're not going to be there close enough to kind of recover out to the shooter. So there's, more than one way to skin a cat, when it comes to being effective out on the perimeter. I know we have a few comms flowing in the comments. Stephen W says, is he Larry Nance Jr.? Norrin Rad says, I think he could be Anthony Mason, which I like. My son's name is Mason Anthony. So, shout out New York.
There you go.
Dirty Dancer, I think the dreams that he becomes PJ Washington. My comp from last year has been like fun to play with Julius Randle, or maybe less moody Julius Randle. Maybe, as like lefty guys who can kind of attack a closeout. In college, Julius Randle was not letting that thing go. He had a 0.46 3-point attempt rate and was shooting less than a 3 per 100 possessions. So Colin Murray-Boyles is a sophomore now, but he is also very young for his class. So he I believe is still freshman age. And he has made a jump from a half a 3 per 100 possessions to 1.7. So he's made a concerted effort to shoot more. But defensively, I think is where the sell is to like how this dude is just an NBA player from the jump, like unbelievable hands, insanely quick processor, big, physical, and I'm very confident that he could slide his feet and guard. Look, the fact of the matter is that good NBA scorers are going to look at just about any defender one-on-one and go, well, I can beat this guy one-on-one. Like that's just how they think, and that's how good these guys are, right? The best NBA players out on the perimeter are going, where is the help? Where's the second line? What read do I have to make after I beat the first guy? But the first guy's job is still to make that part difficult. And I think CMB can do that. I think he's going to make life hard. He's going to make guys work. And sometimes that's all you can do is make them work. Right. So I kind of love it as a shot in the dark, because like if his 3-point shot does develop, that is a level of untapped potential that raises him from this guy who I have him in the lottery. Let me pull up exactly where I have him. But like it goes from a guy who you go, all right, well, why is he like a back end of the lottery guy to in that area to where maybe now he does have that kind of potential, right? So, like I meant like I think 14 right now. So I think that you've sold me that like this is a guy who does make an impact. Obviously his team this year is they're struggling, especially in conference. It's going to be an uphill battle for them, but not due to his play. I'm not really worried about the turnover jump this year. No. I still like a lot of his process, and I think when he plays with better players, a lot of this that stuff will get fleshed out. But I wanted to start with CMB to keep this episode on more of a positive swing. I mean, to be perfectly frank, when I first looked at your board, there was some guys that I was like, oh, I'm gonna pick him for this, and then you update it, and I was like, oh, all right, yeah, this will be a little harder because I like your board. But CMB up there at 6. I've seen it, on draft Twitter or whatever, but within the no ceilings, I believe you were the highest, so I wanted to start there.
Okay, yeah, and I appreciate that, and I knew that this was probably going to be one of the more easier sells that I was going to make on today's show, because you have been pumping the CMB kind of like hype train a little bit at No Ceilings for a while. And last year I wasn't even really that big of a fan, but going through and doing my homework during the summer, coming in, just remembering that he was billed as like the top returner, and I know that you do your homework on this, Corey. You do the initial player values for coming into the season throughout consensus, and across the board he came in as like the top returner. And when I was going through and looking at other people's boards and mocks and stuff like that, and then kind of seeing where he is on a production level, I was actually kind of shocked that he fell as far as he did, because I don't think that he's done anything to kind of like sway like anything on a production level. Like to me, he's like even exceeded expectations on the playmaking and defensive side of things coming into the year. So it was just one of those things where you talk about my perspective coming into the year. I was actually a little shocked to see that he was like in the 20s and late teens and stuff like that at a lot of places.
Yeah, and I think that will change. I mean, one, you mentioned he had a great game tonight against Florida where he showed a lot of the playmaking stuff, finished with 8 assists. He had 3 blocks, right? He's showing that versatility in his game, the things he could offer outside of the scoring, which he still did tonight as well. I think he had 14 points, something like that. But he also he gave Janai Broom the business, before he went out, he was giving him the business. And like, that's, as long as he comes back and, he plays the rest of the season out, like Janai Broom's probably going to be the national player of the year. At least he was the heavy front runner previous to his injury. So, I mean, he gave him the business. He was bodying him up. He showed that physicality. This is a dude who, like, Janai Broom's in his 5th year, right? Like, he's an older dude who is doing the same stuff to the rest of college basketball. So I think that that is going to kind of turn the tide a little bit, and maybe CMB's starting to turn it on a little bit for sure. But if anything, I mean, he's shooting more threes. Like, I don't think that you can go from the level of shooter he was last year, which was very, tentative would be, I guess, the nice way to put it.
Reluctant.
To all of a sudden, reluctant to all of a sudden he's going to be shooting 40% on 7 3-point attempts a game or whatever, right? Like, that's not really realistic. That development is going to be over the long haul. And, hopefully going back to my Julius Randle comp, Julius shoots a ton of threes now, right? Yeah. He shoots a ton of threes now. So Janai Broom developed his 3-point shot a little bit, right? It's slow, it's kind of ugly, and sometimes it goes in, but he shoots them. These things happen as you continue to age and kind of earn those reps, and you could figure out your spots on, all right, I'm not going to be played off the floor if I take this bad 3 right now, right? Like, my coach isn't going to bench me. So he'll earn that eventually. And with good NBA coaching, hopefully that's something that he develops.
Yeah, and I don't think that it's outside the realm of possibility. Again, when I wrote about him, and like of course, like everybody, I put film in there. Like the shot doesn't look ugly, dude. Like it's not the ugliest jumper that I've ever seen. And like he to your point, he's not reluctant to take them as much as what he used to be. And plus, you kind of see signs of touch like around the basket on like the little flip shots, hook shots, runners, floaters. He does some fun things in the mid post as well. So. And what you talked about Janai Broom, how he was giving him the business. It wasn't just like, two big bodies like banging up against each other. He took them out to the perimeter and took them off the bounce a couple times too. So the fact that he is able to be as physically as he is at his size with as much wiggle as he has for his position, I think that does give him a bit of an advantage. But Corey, if we can pivot now, I would like to ask you to sell me a pin. And I'll be honest, because I wasn't big on him coming into the year. When I came back and started watching some of the games, at the point of the season when I was airdropped in about mid-December, still having a hard time. But as of late, your boy Khaman Maluach from Duke has had a couple of bigger games. He's starting to look a little bit more consistent. He's worked his way up to like the tail end of like my first round now. Can you please sell me on him? Because I do have a little bit of a hard time with him still.
All right. Well, Maluach, Duke center, listed at 7'2", 250, 18 years old. And let me tell you, as somebody who watched him practice for a week at the Nike Hoop Summit, he looked every bit of it. Coming into that event, the hot name in the draft sphere was Chomsky. At the time in the 2024 draft, right? And being in those practices, it was like, like when you see him next to a guy like Maluach, where he's at. This is a guy who's a G League. He's going to be in the G League for a while. The potential's there. It's everything, but he's not as big. He's not as skilled. He's not. So I personally came away a lot more impressed out of that event with Maluach than I think a lot of the no ceilings guys were. He didn't play great in the game, but you saw the skill level, you saw the comfortability stepping out on the perimeter and shooting at his size. And again, I can't stress enough how massive he looked in person. You transition from that event into the offseason where he's playing in the Olympics against Team USA. He's facing up Joel Embiid, knocking down a shot right in his grill. He's hitting the corner three. He's stepping out, right? He's showing these skills. I go back, you go and watch the Basketball Without Borders. He's doing a lot of like screen, rescreen, little handoff, a couple of slick passes. That film's kind of tough to watch because the camera angle's so poor. And it's frustrating, but like I left that and I went, all right, there's a little more feel to his game than maybe you see on the surface. He comes into Duke and he's struggling. There's a lot of things that you look at his low assist percentage, right? You maybe look at some of the defensive issues and you go, all right, well, here's this raw guy who is more tools than not talent, more tools than production. He's so far away. How are we going to bet on him? Then you look, he's got an above average box score plus minus as a freshman. He has gotten progressively better through the year as he's gotten comfortable. As the type of role that he's played this year at Duke, which is basically just finish everything, because he's finishing everything.
Yeah.
Everything. He is of the elite efficiency, whether you're, I chart, all the guys who have been drafted and have hit playing the center position. He is in a elite territory as far as his efficiency this year because he is a major lob threat. He crashes the offensive glass. He's got good touch around the rim. And you look at the production, you look at a lot of the advanced stats and you go, hey man, like I know that there's some work to do, but give me that ball of clay. And what I've continued to realize as we get deeper in this process is there are very few guys that I am feeling good about.
Yeah.
There are guys I like a lot, but are they guys that I'm like, I'm certain about this guy being this? And the answer is no. Am I certain that Maluach is going to absolutely 100% be a hit. I'm not, right? There are things that you want to see. You'd like to see the assist percentage rise, which it has a little bit in conference play. It's at about like 5% or so right now. And you look at that and you go, man, that's super low. And then you realize that like Missy was at 3.4 last year. Daniel Gafford was at 6 his pre-draft year. Mark Williams was at 7. Bam was at 4.7. Jared Allen was at 5.7. These lob threat centers really aren't relied upon to do much other than just catch it and put the ball in the damn hoop, which he's doing. So I just look at what he's capable of at a baseline, and I go, an NBA team is going to look at that size frame. They've all seen him up close in a bunch of settings, and he's doing this, and Duke doesn't even have a point guard.
Yeah.
If I had to ask you, who's Duke's point guard right now?
Coop? I don't know.
Cooper? Maybe Kon.
Maybe Kon, yeah.
Yeah, right. It sure as hell ain't Tyrese Proctor. I tweeted this. There ain't nobody who likes getting a mismatch and then looking that mismatch off after the switch and taking a fadeaway jumper after he drives into the help. Ain't nobody likes that more than Tyrese Proctor, right? This is a guy who we thought was a point guard. He's not a point guard. He's a combo guard who likes to shoot a lot and sometimes makes a fancy pass. He's playing with no point guards. And he's able to still be a guy who's putting vertical pressure on the rim. And I look at that in an NBA offense, and I got high hopes. So I have him at 8 right now. I'm probably the highest in the no ceiling squad. Yeah, he's got his warts, right? We saw in the Notre Dame game, he got faced up and in the little, like, I don't know, elbow extended area out on, and, you know, a little shimmy. He got beat to the rim, to the baseline, even though Kon probably should have, you know, in the low man spot to help out. But then he also had this possession where he literally covered the entire court.
Yeah.
You know, a few possessions later. There's up, there's down. I wish his shot blocking was a little more effective, but then at the same time, a lot of times I see guys have to Nash dribble out of the spot because they don't even want to put up a shot near him. So, you know, there's things that we're going to have to be patient on. And then there's things where I just go, you can't teach this. It's not like he's one of these guys where it's like he's listed at 6'11", but he's going to measure at 6'9". He's massive.
Yeah.
I think he's got a great frame. He's going to get strong. I think a team is going to let him, you know, utilize that touch more when he gets to the league. And if he's put in a position where he's, you know, got a guy who can actually really pass, you know, we saw how as soon as Dallas took Lively, we went, okay,
yep,
Luka's going to get the best out of him. You know, obviously, you know, a team like Charlotte has Mark Williams, but like a passer like LaMelo, what that would do for a guy like Maluach. There's a lot of those guys
miss games.
Yeah, but there's a lot of guys in the league, right? So I just look at him and I go, I'm willing to take the shot. I know he's not perfect, but neither is Jeremiah Fears, who's shooting 28.9%, you know, from 3. Neither is Yegor, who feels like hasn't made a 3 since you went on your excursion in the ocean. Ace probably hasn't had an assist since that same time frame. You know?
Yeah.
You know, like Kasparis has been pivoting in the paint for that same time frame, just, you know, left foot spinning, pump faking. So like all these guys got knots, man. VJ hasn't made a shot, like, you know, or use his left hand.
Boogie's got a hand injury.
Yeah, you know, all these guys have questions. So I'm not gonna be like, well, those guys, like Khaman's got something that those guys don't have. Like a lot of those guys, which are physical tools that are irreplicable. VJ, he has nuclear athleticism that you can't really replicate, but he's 6'3", right? Yeah. You know, like you can't teach 7'2" with that length, with that wingspan, and the potential of one day also stretch the floor. I gotta rock with this guy, you know, for the squad.
Yeah, Corey, bro, you sold me on him. You know, I'm looking at some of the things that I put in my notes. Double-digit scoring 3 of the last 5 games. Those other 2 games, he did score 8 points on over 68% shooting on the field on his worst game. Had a block in every single game since December 10th, which is 8 games. I do wish, like to your point, that he would have a little bit higher of a block rate. But to your point, like people got to shoot in order for him to block the shot, right? I worry a little bit about the foot speed, and I do worry about the processing to be able to have the offense flow through him. Like those are my two big things that I am a little bit worried about. But to your point, man, you're right. Like he's huge. He sets incredible screens. He is a heck of a play finisher. He does rebound, and I don't know. Like we were talking about this the other day, Corey, that I think players 4 through 35 are the closest on my board that they've ever been in any other draft class. So I don't know. I have him 26 on my board right now. Hearing your sales pitch, that's probably too low, especially considering some of the other names that I have ahead of him. I don't know if I can get there with like top 5, top 10, but 26 does feel too low after that sales pitch, man. Great job.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
You're a teacher, right? You're not a salesman, right?
That's right. Sometimes, we got to sell ads and stuff on this show, which, if you want to rock, sponsor the Sell Me This Pen segment, hit us up. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we will get into our next two prospects. All right, Steven. Now, this guy it was just in, the Twitter draft Twitter news because it appears he is going to be out for the season. If my outline is correct, I need you to sell me this pen on Arkansas guard Boogie Fland.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to do because he is missing the rest of the year. And I'll be honest, dude, like I don't know what that does to his draft projection, like at all. I think that he was kind of flirting with, late lottery, kind of middle of the first round territory. I am a little bit kind of shaky on that, but depending on how the rest of the players finish this year out, I think that there is a world where teams could still feel good about taking Boogie. And I see people in the chat. Yes, I know that he's an undersized guard. I get that, right? Like that, we'll get that right out of the way. He's about 6'2", 180 pounds. But I think that he has the tools to be successful at that size. Like there's just something about watching the way that he moves. Like his percentages are really low. And Corey, we were talking about this offline yesterday. I wonder how long that hand injury has been there, how much that's been a product of his, inefficiencies. But if you watch him, man, like he gets everywhere he wants to get on the court. Like he moves so well with the ball in his hand. He looks like an NBA point guard, right? Kind of like Darius Garland-esque. And I see that in his handle. I see that in his ability to like manipulate a defender to get on his backside, keep him there, force fouls, force tough plays from the defense, like hit open people because he just puts so much pressure on the basket. The shot is really going to be the big swing skill. And Corey, if you're telling me that if we get to kind of middle of the first round and you do need a guard and Jeremiah Fears is gone because someone bid on the Russell Westbrook comparison that he's going to have coming in, right? And of course, Dylan Harper's long gone. He's probably the second, maybe the third prospect being taken off the board. You need a guard. You need someone to organize the offense. Like Boogie can do that, and he's essentially done it all year long with one hand tied behind his back, right? And he's doing it in an offense. Listen, I'm from the great state of Arkansas, Woo Pig. I love the Razorbacks, right? Calipari is doing the same thing that he's done everywhere else. Just give me a bunch of prospects. We're going to run basic motion offense, and I'm just going to let these people who are playing in the most athletic conference in college basketball try to figure it out on the fly and tell everybody who's scouting them is like, they got all these other skill sets that they don't just get to see because they got to play a role on my team, right? And Calipari guards are notorious for getting these bumps to where they look great in the pros because they are kind of relegated to a kind of outdated, antiquated role in college basketball. But Boogie still shows flashes on the offensive end. Not to mention that whenever Arkansas was rolling, his point of attack defense was phenomenal. Like, he was in the jersey of whoever he was lined up against on a consistent basis. The more losses that Arkansas kind of mounted up, the less you started seeing that. And there's probably a lot going on as to why Boogie is like all of a sudden he's gone now, right? And not coming back for the rest of the year. But he moves like a water bug out there, dude. He covers so much ground on his crossovers, his step backs, decel is on point, has a lot of craft around the basket, runner floater game is right there, has shown great flashes of point of attack defense. Like, that's on defense for his position. That's all you really need to see. I just want someone who's going to go out there and compete and not just like die on a screen and like that's the end of it, right? So you get a guard that can do all that. He can get his teammates open. He can get himself open. He's super duper athletic. I have him on my board. I think I have him at like 15 right now, and that was pre-hand injury. So I think he's worth a swing in that range.
Yeah, I mean, the hand injury is what it is, right? It's like it's not going to hamper him for the rest of his career, I'd imagine. Who knows what the extent of it is. I mean, I don't want to make declarations. I don't know. Maybe it does. But I would imagine it's just something that'll heal. I think Boogie is going to be like the epitome of, the great eye test versus statistics.
Oh, yes.
Because when you I'm going to be honest, up until I think Tyler talked about him for the Panic Meter episode, a few weeks ago, or maybe it was last week. Time's a flat circle at this point.
Yes.
And they were like, "Are you worried about Boogie?" And I was like, "Why are we worried about Boogie?"
Yeah.
And because when I watch him, I'm like, he's moving so smooth, right? He glides. He doesn't even move on the court. His handle's crazy. He could separate. The shot it looks pure. I mean, he's another guy that, he's a New York kid playing at Stepinac, got to see him play at Hoop Summit again, so you're seeing that behind the scenes stuff. You're like, man, that shot is butter. It's wet, right? And that's why he shot 60% on unguarded catch and shoot shots while he was playing. And then you even look at some of the rim stuff, and I'm like, all right, well, he's got a little bit of up and under finesse, whatever, right? He's not like super bursty. He's not obviously super bouncy. But until I listened to that episode, and then I went in and went, wait, what's he shooting at the rim?
Yeah.
30. Does that say 36?
Yeah.
And then, you looked at his percentage of what he's shooting overall. I went, and I just kept going, really? Him? I said, am I looking at the right guy right now? How sometimes on Synergy, you type in and you click really quick, and then you go down, and you're like, oh, I clicked on the wrong guy. I couldn't believe it. So when I watch him, like, I think he's a good playmaker. I like his process. Yep. And he moves the way NBA guys move. But man, those stats are concerning.
Yes.
It's one of those things where, like, obviously this team is kind of in a what is going on, like, for every prospect, right? Like, an anonymous coach said Cal was archaic was the term, right? Like, there's who knows what's going on there. Nobody in particular is really playing well on that team, I guess, except for Tiero. And even obviously he has his warts as well, but the percentages are what they are. They're concerning. Now, he's a good free throw shooter, right? Obviously he's a good catch and shoot guy. So I'm not really worried about him as a shooting prospect. He's got deep range. He's got a good assist percentage. He doesn't turn the ball over all that much. Like you said, I like the point of attack defense. I think as long as you could stay in front of your man as a guard and just try to make things difficult and try to get under somebody. And, there's only so much you could do at that height, but you can still make guys work and try to get teams out of their defense from the jump. right? That's your goal if you're going to be a tough point of attack defender. I think he's capable of that, but the efficiency is a real problem. It is. And is that scenario? Is it slump? Is it hand injury? Those are questions that maybe we need some intel on fully. It's also only 18 games, that sample, and who knows how he would have finished the season. There's plenty of time for these guys to go one way or the other. It certainly can't get much worse.
That's true. Almost only way it can go is up. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, but the other thing is there are a lot of guards in this class that you can go, well, I like this guy because, and you can make an argument and sell a pen for any one of these guards. You like Phylon, you could
in his conference alone,
right? You like Tahad, you can make this argument for any of these guys. You like Jeremiah Fears, right? Let's make the argument for it. Like, there's just what about Jace Richardson? Maybe you're a true advanced stats guy. There's just a ton of small guards. Another one that we'll talk about later in this episode. And then that's before you get to like, all right, well, I like Xavion Lee, like until you get deeper. Javon, what about Javon Small?
Love Javon. Watch Clayton Jr. Yeah.
So you have to be able to be like, well, this is why I like these guys better than that. And if I'm going to take them in the top 20 with these numbers, this is why I believe he's better than that. So it's one of those. What about Cam, your guy?
Yeah, I love Cam.
Right? Like there's a lot of these guards that are, and look, Cam is the smallest 6'5" I've ever seen on film, but I'm done trying to predict heights because when I watched pods, I was like, he looks like he's 6'1", and then he measured in at what he was actually listed at, and I was like, this is why you can't eye test height. So, like
NBA Jam in the chat said Salas has been nice too. If you consider him to be a lead guard, I love Salas.
He's been on a tear.
He's my dude.
He's been on a heater. About time. Let's
Thank
keep
God,
rocking.
He
right?
needed it. Yeah.
Yeah. He did.
He needed that. He needed that. I was worried.
Ian Jackson.
I was really worried.
Ian Jackson went on a heater, a guy that I got to see live recently. So there's just a lot of these guards who, you can just make the argument for. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who fall off with Boogie just because well as you could try to sell somebody on the aesthetics of how he plays on the court, you could be like, but where's the effectiveness?
Exactly. And if you're looking at efficiency too, and you're going off of Phil, like you mentioned earlier, like Jeremiah Fears, like that's what he's kind of built his whole game off of, is like he just plays so athletically freakish. Like even though he's kind of suffering with some inefficiencies as well, the whole thing with him is like, oh, he looks like Russell Westbrook. You know what I mean? Like it is hard, and we'll talk about this. I want to save this question for the next guard. I do have a little bit of struggles with evaluating some guards. It's probably one of the hardest positions. I think the longer that I've done this, it's always become more difficult to project guards, especially traditionally sized guards. I would say it's hard, but the things that I value if I am going to swing on an undersized guard, because I don't do it a lot, I kind of trust the ability to get to where he wants to go intelligently as opposed to physically dominating, because long term that skill is going to go away. But the craft, the wiggle, the predetermination, the ability to read a defense, the ability to be able to use the screener and manipulate the defender to get him to where he wants to go, shield him away and get his shot off. Like that's the type of craft that I value when I'm looking at a guard. And I think that's the type of guard that Boogie is going to be long-term. So, and that stands the test of time. I mean, look, Chris Paul's speed demon in his day, right? But he played with changed pace and could just have the defense sort of move around him. He didn't have to jump over the top of everybody. He just read the court really well. And I think that's what Boogie has a little bit.
Yeah. And, Boogie's an off the bounce shooter, and when you can get to those elbows and hit those pull up jumpers, and his dribble jumper, you look at the raw percentage at 33%, and you're like, that's not really great, but that's right around the average for what all NBA guards over the last like 15 years have shot. So he does have a lot of the things that you say. And when you get to the elbow, you can pick the defense apart, right? Like, and he can get to that spot. So I'm willing to buy in on it a little bit. I wish we got to see more. I have him at the back end of the first round.
That's fair. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yeah, and there's guys that I look at and go, on any given day, you could convince me otherwise, right? That's where we're at in this draft.
Yeah, so the next guy that we're going to be talking about, I actually have in the back part of my first round, and I know you're significantly higher. I think this is going to be a harder sell for me, like right off the rip, than his teammate was, but Kon Knueppel, kind of hope that he goes to play for the Toronto Raptors just so we get Knueppel and Dick on the same team. Like, does that make me a degenerate? Like, I kind of want that to happen.
Yeah, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. There's no way of knowing. But so Kon Knueppel, I think Duke listed him at 6'7". We'll see.
Yeah,
I think selling you on Kon is dude has got a strap. That's my selling point for this dude. He has got a strap, and it took a while to get going. But as you alluded to in the outline, in conference play, he's shooting 45% from three, 49% from the field, 45 from three, 81 at the line. I think he's close to 90% at the line through this year. Kon is not going to be one of the sexy pens that has like the cool, like, oh, it feels good when I hold it at the bottom because they put a little like rubber thing to make it feel comfortable in your hand, or there's like a sharp ballpoint pen. Like, he's just old reliable. Like, there's nothing sexy about his game other than the dude just knows how to play. Like, he is one of these dudes who I think is just going to be valuable to an NBA offense. I don't think he's going to be a first option. I don't think he's going to be a second option necessarily, but I do think that he's one of these guys that can get hot and operate like that when he is feeling it. This is a dude to me who, even though I wish he was rebounding more, right? Like, I wish he was using it. We called him farm strong. Albert referred to him as farm strong, I believe, even though I don't think he lived on a farm. When we did his just as a way to like describe his body, that you want to be able to have him, get low man wins, box out, and just kind of hit the boards a little harder. But I just think the what he does for an offense off the ball, and again, we're dealing with a Duke team where I don't even think they have guys who could put him in the spots that a good NBA guard would put him in, right? Again, if there's an argument, he's the best passer on the team. So that means that like the next guy up in that scenario, if you made that argument, would be Coop, who is, a newly turned 18-year-old basketball phenom, but he's a wing. He's not a natural point guard like Luka was at the same age, right? Like, he's just a smart playmaker capable of making some pretty nice passes and just processes the game well, but he's not like a manipulator like that. So we're looking at somebody who, again, is not being optimized, I think, based on the construction of the roster, is starting to finally find his rhythm as a shooter. And I think is underrated as a guy who plays with the ball in his hands. Now, when you look at guys who can be patient and play with pace in the pick and roll, who are strong enough to be able to handle the ball, have a guy sit on his hip, and still comfortably kind of put a little, retreat, a little jail dribble and kind of throw a lob up to Maluach, soft touch, like right in the right spot, make reads where, you're reading, reacting. I think when you're looking at him as a shooter, it's not just standstill. He can shoot it off movement. And I think that you can give him a ball screen and he's comfortable kind of getting to like a little mini step back type of thing. So I think his game, because it's not super flashy and, he's kind of like Reed, where it's just like, this dude doesn't have any accessories. He's got like mid ankle socks. Like, he's boring.
You don't have any VC yet. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got no VC. He doesn't have Tyler Hero, like shaved head, like swag. Like he's just like, to me, he's a safe bet to be a good NBA player. Defensively, he's not a guy who's creating a ton of defensive events, right? We know he's not like super athletic. He had like that one poster dunk early in the year, but even in EYBL, he really wasn't getting bouncy. So he's not going to block shots at the rim. He's not really turning guys over, getting in the passing lane, stuff like that. But I think he could slide. I think he could bang. And he is kind of from like, I'm kind of from the Kirk Heinrich school of like, make guys make tough shots. Like you don't have to turn a guy over to play good defense. Just slide and give a good contest and try to make it hard. And then hopefully let's get a rebound. I think he can do that. He's not going to be a lockdown guy, but I don't know if you're going to be able to pick on him either, necessarily. I think he does move laterally pretty well, even though he's not like super quick laterally. I think he's smart and he's physical and he'll be in the right spots mostly. So, and obviously, we're talking as these guys develop, not him coming into the league next year as a rookie, but he's got a very bankable skill and arguably the most bankable skill that you need in the NBA as a plus decision maker and a pretty crafty passer and somebody who's capable of dribbling the ball comfortably and not just creating a shot for himself, but potentially a shot for somebody else. So when you're looking at all those skills and you're looking at how seamlessly he could fit into whatever offense you want to put him into, I look at it as a guy, I have him at 11, right? This is not a guy who I have at 5. He looked like a guy who maybe, if he was really going to be 6'7", and if he, maybe was rebounding a little harder, and if that athleticism bump really took place when we saw the poster, that you could see that path, that hasn't materialized. I'm still struggling to find guys that are more than like really theoretically interesting over him at this point and juncture. And I'm just banking on him transitioning to being an elite shooter when he goes into the NBA. And I think his percentages are trending that way. And by the end of the season, we're going to see that kind of player.
Yeah. So I think fit is going to be probably most important for a guy like Kon coming in, because if he could go to a team, and I know everyone's going to throw out, like the Oklahoma City or like the Cleveland or the Bostons, even a team like Orlando, going to a team that has like the defensive infrastructure around him to where he can go in, just compete hard, and just do the thing that he's really good at, he'll probably thrive. I don't know how many teams are in a position to where they can take a guy like him, though, because like I have him 28th on my board. Again, I have him in a range where he could go up significantly higher. I just the size, I think one listing that I saw before the year was that he was closer around like 6'5". Maybe he is taller. But I do worry about pretty much everything but the shooting and passing. But those are two really important skills, right? Like you mentioned, I think that he might look a lot different on a team where he does have someone setting the table for him to where he is running off of like some drag screens or some staggers, some flares, stuff like that. Maybe kind of doing what Zach Hitz is doing in Penn State, where he's like the Spain pick and roll screen setter and then popping out. Like he'd probably look a lot cooler doing stuff Temple like legend. That, right? Yeah, Temple legend, right? But the shots there, I mean, 45% in the ACC, that's nothing to sneeze at. I worry about the athleticism, the ability to create separation for Kon. It's hard to not have him in a range, though, to where you wouldn't consider him, because the shot is like a proven commodity where you're looking for truths with prospects in a class past like the top 2 or 3. You need truths for players. Kon has a truth, and that's his 3-point shooting, and also the ancillary playmaking that he provides the team as well. So I think that Kon is interesting depending upon fit. Where the lottery shakes out and the draft order is set, I might have him go up a little bit higher. But right now, I don't know how valuable he'll be for like a very good team, like especially around playoff time. That's what has me a little bit more hesitant around him. But I do think that he is incredibly skilled and could be in a range where he could go up depending on how other people perform throughout the rest of the year.
So like, yeah, I mean, look, fit for most of these guys, you're looking for the optimal fit, right? Like, should Brooklyn take him at 6? Probably not, right? Like, they're going to be a team that's in just straight up full rebuild mode. But if I look at, a team like San Antonio at 10, a team that is going to need guys who can really shoot the rock, like Stephen Castle, we love him, right? He's going to be more of a rim pressure downhill guy who hopefully shoots a little bit. You have Wemby behind him, right? But then you have a guy like Sohan who, you're going to need some floor spacers outside of your guy who's 7'5", who ideally you want to be able to mix up being close to the rim and being far away from it. I look at a team like Portland who, even at 7, where, all right, that might sound high, but like, hey, if Scoot is the guy, you need as many floor spacers that are pure floor spacers as you could possibly get, especially with, all the non-shooters that they have. I look at Miami, who has just made a living of making these guys just absolutely destroy teams, right? Like, and Miami's at 11 right now, and who knows? Houston right now in the lottery with Phoenix's pick. I believe like that's a team that, they took Reed hoping he's going to shoot. I think Reed's going to be just fine as he continues to develop. You have the athleticism of Tari and Amen and Jalen, and that, like, let's get some floor spacing and guys who can cover. Obviously, you mentioned Orlando. That would be, perfect too. Like that range to me, it's like, like I like a lot of these guys. I love Rasheer Fleming. I think he's in that range, but is he going to make sense for, a team like Houston? Like, probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not. Like, because not only, he would fit, but like, is he going to do too many things differently that would be like, we got to take Amen and Tari off the court and Jabari? A lot of this is like roster building. I get the best player available. I totally get it. But sometimes you're convincing yourself that the best player available is the best player available. Is that player going to be the best player available on your team or on your G League team? Like, you can only have so many guys and it can't be the best player if you don't allow them to develop.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't have all pressure on a team.
You have to balance, like, who are the best players available that are in my range, and then, like, who am I going to allow to blossom fully and not just, be suffocated in their cocoon. I think we miss that because sometimes you need to get on the floor to develop, and of course there's rest and whatever the NBA is calling it, and injuries and all that. But, sometimes you do need that marriage of, okay, we believe in this prospect as in their talent, but also they do fit with what it is we're building. And when you could play in multiple spots and you have multiple skills, it's obviously easier. That's why OKC has been able to get so many guys who can fit together, because they're all so skilled. They do so many things. Not every prospect at the top here is like that, where you can just seamlessly fit them in wherever. So I think Kon has a little bit of that.
Yeah, and I think too, it depends on what flavor of shooter you like. I'm more Liam, and I hate to say this, Corey, but Alex Caravan. I know he had a sick move the other night, little spin move, little flip layup, but it really depends.
I feel much more comfortable with Alex Caravan where you have him on your board now. When I saw some of you guys having Alex Caravan in the lottery, I almost fell out of my chair. I'll tell you right now.
I'm not ruling it out.
The Bulls at number 10, they were at number 9. Like, if my favorite team ended up at like pick 12 and they drafted Alex Caravan, I wouldn't watch them anymore.
I feel like you've held the Bulls hostage with fandom for a couple of seasons now, though, Corey.
I don't really watch them that much. And they took a Lithuanian guy.
They did everything they could to make you happy, except they took the wrong one. But a year early. I think that it really just depends though on which shooter you value, and I think that there are cases to be made for other shooters, but you're making a good point too, because you can't just get all pressure, guys. Like, basketball is a game of pressure and gravity, right? Like, you have to have pulling and pushing forces on the offensive side of the ball to keep the defense honest. And you're right. I mean, you're listing off all those names that are in the lottery, early lottery as well, who do need some people with some shooting gravity. And there's maybe 2, some people may argue 3, like, terrific shooters that are kind of within that range, and Colin's one of them. And you get him on a cheap rookie deal as well, and then you have second contract rights on him as well. And we know how valuable the second apron thing is in the NBA now. So it's certainly not out of the question.
No, not at all. All right, let's take another quick break and then get to our last segment, breaking down our last two guys. All right, we're back for our last segment. And Steven, let's get right into it. I'm going to be honest. This is a guy who I've watched, San Diego State this year, but I haven't just strictly watched from a scouting perspective where I'm just focusing on one guy and looking at the ins and outs. Sell me this pen, Miles Byrd, in your top 20, 15th on your board. Sell me this pen on Miles Byrd.
Yeah, Maxwell and I have been talking about Miles Byrd for a while. I know that the Tylers have been overly fond of him as well. Just a guy who's on an upward trajectory throughout the entire season. Corey, we all value, the summer scouting and stuff like that. I fancy myself as somewhat of a draft sicko, and I didn't know who Miles Byrd was when I came back. But I came back and looked at him, and Corey, I mean, let's just talk player types for a second. Mm-hmm. What player types are among the most valuable for any NBA team?
Whatever Victor and Chet are.
Okay, let's say that you don't have that available in this draft. What would you look for next?
6'7", 6'8" wing
who roster.
6'7", 6'8" wing who could do a little bit of everything.
I would say 3-and-D prospects, right?
Sure. 3-and-D plus, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think 3-and-D prospect is essentially like what everyone's going to be looking for. And I would also say like jumbo initiators too, like big playmakers. I think that right now Miles Byrd is a 3-and-D guy, hands down, which is why I have him where I do. I wouldn't rule out the fact that like he can't continue to grow as like a big playmaker, maybe not like a lead facilitator, but like a very reliable secondary, tertiary playmaker. Think of the mold of like a Jalen Williams at Oklahoma City, right? So I said a buzz name there, so automatically everybody's ears are perked up now, right?
Of course.
Shoots 39% from deep on over 12 attempts per 100. So like real deal shooting right there for all the stat heads. Below average rim finisher, but he does get to the rim. He does put pressure on the basket, and he does draw fouls. So he is not like contact adverse. He's 6'7", 190 pounds. I think that there is the ability for him to get a little bit stronger. I'm not like a kinesiology expert or anything like that, but I do think that there's some frame there to build upon. I think that right now, if you look at him in the NBA, he's probably a 2 that moonlights at like a 1 or a 3, depending on like the defense opposition and stuff like that. He rebounds incredibly well. He has a solid handle, makes good decisions with the ball. He's got a 1.7 ATO for all the people who look on Bartorvik. Block and steal rate of at least 4. So he is a demon on the defensive side, right? So you got someone who's shooting over 39% from deep. You got someone who is an athletic freak of nature with a handle and who is just everywhere as like a help side defender, rotational guy. You get lazy and try to throw a stupid skip pass around him, a man's turning it into 2 points on the other end on your head. I just think that right now he's an easy 3-and-D prospect, and there's not a lot of those guys. Like a legit 3-and-D prospect in this class. There's not any of them. And then you look at the upside with him. He's got a handle. He makes good decisions with the ball. You put him in a system to where he could continue to grow into a role. Now you're looking at a guy who's a 3-and-D with secondary, tertiary, like real secondary, real tertiary playmaking chops. You have a guy who is probably going to be like top 5, top 7 in like redrafts and stuff like that. There is a lot of potential with a guy like this, and he's getting better throughout the year. I believe in his two-way ability right now. I believe that the ceiling could be a little bit more optimistic for him. to where like this 15th ranking that I have for him right now could even be too low by season's end. But like right now, that's where I have him, and there's no stopping. I'm not putting a cap on how high he can rise up my board. I'm a big believer in the young man.
Yeah, obviously at 6'7", you do want to see the finishing improve, right? You obviously the 3-point shooting is helping the efficiency, but all the other stuff, outside of that, it's hard to nitpick his game too much. Maybe he doesn't have the craziest bag in the world as far as his off the bounce shooting, but sometimes keeping it simple and keeping it to 1, 2, 3 dribbles, right? That's better than dancing with the rock. His value on the wing in that connective, archetype, obviously that's something that's super valuable if he can continue to be a good 3-point shooter and spacer in the league and be a two-way guy, because if you can defend and you can knock down threes, you got a pretty good chance, and you're not turning the ball over, you got a pretty good chance of staying on the floor, right? And we said, in order to develop, you got to be able to stay on the floor. So he's another one of these guys. I think it's important to find guys who can fit into many different roster constructs. And it's hard to argue that this is not a guy that every team would want. I guess except for the Bulls, because they like forwards who can't really shoot it that much or refuse to do it over the course of their 4-year development and sign an extension, and now probably going to get sold off for at their lowest value. But yeah, he's definitely interesting.
So they're in contention for Yegor then, right? Like Yegor, Ben Sarah.
Give me I'm still in on Yegor. I still like Yegor.
Okay.
I don't want to sell you this pen on Yegor right now. But I could still wax poetic on Yegor if we wanted. But I like Byrd. I like that pick. And you guys, putting him there early, he definitely seems like the type of guy who can rise if he continues to put up some of these really, really impressive numbers. So want to see what the frame looks like without the long sleeve shirt. But other than that,
yeah, that's the biggest thing holding me back. And I've kind of prefaced this earlier, like I'm big on physicality. I just think that the frame looks like it can support more the buzzword functional strength. I think the athleticism really pops. I mean, look at what we saw with the Thompsons, right? Like come in as string beans. Like I don't think that Byrd is like a 99th percentile athlete or anything like that, but I think that he's a high-end athlete. He's long, right? Like that the length is what's going to allow him to it's going to cover up some of the strength errors that you might see with him. Yeah.
I agree. It certainly helps. It's better to be long and skinny than negative
short
wingspan guy. Yeah. For sure. All right. I guess that leaves me. So yeah, I'll let you take it and ease me up into this.
Yeah. So this next guy, I will kind of do the same thing as you. Like of all the guys that we've talked about, this is a guy I've seen the least amount of time. I went back and watched him a little bit today. Still struggling a little bit. John Mobley Jr., another 6'1" guard. This one playing for the University of Ohio State. He and Miles Byrd, I think, were like 2 spots apart on our latest no ceilings board. I'm interested to see which way that breaks. Corey, I want to ask you this, and maybe this is what's going to sell me, right? Like if we're saying like for me, and I'm sure the audience will appreciate this as well. With a guy like John Mobley Jr., what is the difference, in your opinion, between a really good college guard and a clear cut, like this is an NBA guy?
In reference to John Mobley Jr., my simple selling pitch is I think he is a defense warping shooter.
Okay.
I think when you think of shooting gravity, you think of a guy like John Mobley Jr. Now, I think he's probably a multi-year college guy.
Okay.
To be fair. But once I get into this range, I don't really love a lot of guys. It's more like I just like a lot of the guys. And what I look at with Mobley is that I think he is he's not just like, oh, he's a good shooting prospect. I think he is a phenomenal shooting prospect. And since the first time I saw him play when he was a junior in high school, I went, what am I watching? What did that look like right there? Now, when you look at guys who shoot, okay, look at how the defense is panicking as they're walking around the court, running around the court, where they're pulling up from. John Mobley Jr. is the guy who, when the shot goes up, the end of the opposing bench just goes like this with their hands in the air. When he gets on a heater, it's one of those like, what are you going to do type of stuff. Now I know that when you wish that kind of shooter was 6'4", like legitimately, rather than what Mobley is, I think, listed at 6'1". Whenever he measures, we'll see. I do think his frame has gotten significantly better since the first time I watched him in high school.
I like his shoulders. The shoulder width looks like he could get a little stronger.
Yeah. You know? And he has his warts for sure. Right. The finishing is an area where, he's better in the half court, where he's at like 50%, which is below average. But in transition, he kind of gets like too much dip on his chip and tries to do these up and under things. And sometimes he's just got to go into the contact, embrace it, because he's a knockdown free throw shooter as well. But look at where he's pulling up from on a lot of these shots. Look at it, like real logo range, like legitimate. Yeah. And I think he sends defenses sometimes into a panic. And what I think he does is that he is the type of guy who, because of the space that he occupies and you can't really leave him, it allows the rest of your team to have an easier time operating in the offense. It allows guys who are going to be able to get downhill a little bit easier, because you can't really help off of him too much. You can't, if he's at the top of the key, stand at the logo, you can't really dig on that drive as much when it's coming from the wing, because if you do, and that kick out goes, like, he's fine shooting it from the logo. Now he's been, up and down recently, right? And sometimes I think maybe he needs to, where he's at in his career, maybe ease up on some of those long shots and focus on maybe playing a little bit more in, and not having to kind of do the Steph Curry impression that sometimes I think he's trying to do. And that's something he's got to kind of learn. But, for him, I think it would be smart to stay in college. I don't know if it would be Ohio State's the best place. I would want an assurance like, hey, like, I want to play with the ball in my hands as much as I'm playing without it. Because right now he's almost, with Thornton, like, you're not really taking the rock out of his hands all that much. He doesn't really make mistakes. Coaches like that. Because when I see him dance with the ball too, he can get into the lane. He's shifty. He's got shake. And then he's makes some really slick passing reads. I think he's a better passer than his like raw assist numbers will lead you to believe. So ultimately, I think he's going to stay. I think he's going to continue to develop his game. But if he came out, like, I could at least be like, you know what? This kid has something that's special. Whereas a lot of the other guys, I can get that in free agency. I can get that in the next draft. I probably can get that in the second round. I don't think you can get the level of shooter that I believe that he is in the draft all the time. And I think like that level of shooting gives him a safety net as a floor, to where it's like, I think he's going to be at least like Seth Curry. I'm not saying he's going to be Steph, but like, I think he can at least carve out where he's Seth. Just because of, to me, I am that much a believer in his ability to shoot.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where I struggle, right? Because I mean, right off the rip, very good shooter with crazy range. Like, that's one of the first things in my notes. But like, I'm a guy who believes in Tahad Pettiford. So what I'm kind of having to wrestle with internally is like, how can I believe in one and not the other, right? But when I go through and look, I do think that they share some similarities, because like, one thing that I was kind of like expecting to come in and see with the John Mobley Jr. was, I thought he was going to play rushed a lot, and he didn't. Like, he played with a lot of good poise. Like, he kind of a lot of the same things we was talking about with Boogie, is that he has like a real herky jerky cadence. Like, he based the defenders into making mistakes, and I really like that. I have in my notes, like, I legit don't know how good of a playmaker he is, and that's not like a derogatory thing. That's just like a big question mark I have, because like you mentioned, Thornton, love him. Like, he is a great guard as well. Like, he has potential to potentially be an NBA player, like, in his own right. But I don't know how good of a decision maker as like a dominant ball handler Mobley is all the time. And that's like a question for me. Obviously, like a lot of small guards, you question like the translation, because even for point guards translating up, rebounding is usually there for like some of the better or like the best point guards to ever like go from college into the pros, right? Like you have some examples of like people who are contrary to that rule, like the exceptions, but I do worry about like the physicality aspect translating up for Mobley. But hearing you say that like you think that he would want to stay, like that he could stay, get better and stuff like that, that makes more sense to me, especially when it comes to like finishing and things like that. But you're right, man. Like he has like one thing that a lot of people don't have, and that's like stupid crazy range, and he's consistent at it. So I don't even have him in my top 60. Like, and again, that's because I've probably seen like 2 games of his, and I'm trying to like cast a wide net and then kind of like trim it down. He probably will end up in my top 60. I just don't know how high. But yeah, like the range is incredibly crazy with him as well.
Yeah, and to me, it's as simple as that. I think he's a special shooter. Like, I don't think he's a great shooter. I think he's a special shooter. Yeah. And, sometimes when you have a special skill, maybe you have to learn to hone that and perfect it, at times. But I think once that happens, like the fact that he can run you around screens and like you can't, like, it creates chaos for a defense in a way that, like he's creating an advantage on the court, in my opinion, when he doesn't have the ball.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong. Maybe he's not that special of a shooter. Maybe he's just a really good shooter, and that hampers his long-term potential. But and I know the warts. I know that there's only going to be so much he could do defensively. I know, the height and the finishing right now, what it is, and if that doesn't get better, that's. But like in that range, you have, to me, that's like, all right, these are guys we're willing to take a bet on at this point, because all of these guys have real flaws at this point. So, do I need to take somebody who, is a little more polished because they've been in college for a few years, but doesn't really have a standout skill, and you can kind of just get them whenever, when I think I have a chance to get like something that could at least be like a weapon that another team has to game plan for in a different way when he is on the court, even if it's only going to be for 17 minutes a game, can I see him ultimately playing out and developing in a way where it's like Peyton Pritchard-esque or something? Like I kind of can. So, I think that kind of has a unique value. And so I value that a little more highly than I would than like, all right, let me take KJ Lewis. Like, I know he can defend and his advanced stats are great and that's cool, but like just as equal, like I still have to worry if can he even shoot, and is that going to get him on the floor, even though like all of the numbers say that I should value that more highly, right? Like, so that it's just
JD Davidson, right? Like who?
Yeah, like I'm just so you. These are all calculated risks that you have to weigh pros and cons for. And I think that for me tips the scale, because I just think there's one special thing that he could do in a way that not everybody can. So
that's true. Yeah. I mean, I get the logic behind it, man. Like the special skill is there. I think that, you're talking about a guy who could do like Trae Young type things from like shooting distance, and you don't get that from a lot of prospects. Like LeBaron Philon isn't shooting, Jeremiah Fears isn't shooting, there's shooting concerns with a lot of the guards in this class, but here we have one who's like a true blue freshman who shows great signs of passing feel as well and parking lot range.
Yeah. So that's my sell. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Steven, it's been awesome having you on. Tell the people where they can find you and the work you released today, and the whole outro that we usually do.
I got you, man. Well, and I appreciate you giving me the bat signal to come on, man. It was awesome to join you. Love getting to chop it up with you anytime that I can. Shout out to everybody in the chat hanging out with us on an evening in which it was snowing in Georgia today, Southeast Georgia. Like it never does that. So it was a great day because it snowed, and a great day I got to hang out with you, man. But I have a piece on Colin Murray-Boyles that for anybody who in the chat who hasn't read this yet, like I'm really, really proud of this. So like I would appreciate everyone going over to NoCeilingsNBA.com. You can read this for 100% free. If you want to subscribe to read all the other work that everybody else is putting out, I would encourage that as well. Like we're in late season stride already. It's only going to get better. And I wrote about Colin Murray-Boyles, who had a great showing tonight. It was a great timed piece because I pointed out the playmaking specifically in the article, and he went and had 8 assists tonight, so that was cool. I'm going to have a piece drop tomorrow too for some in-season scouting notes where I shared about some prospects who play for North Florida and Jacksonville. Some real sickos in there, so anybody who wants to get up on some sicko prospects, please feel free to check that out. And I'll be recording with Maxwell live Sunday evening as normal, where we're going to be talking about Colin Murray-Boyles, along with some other prospects as well who we like a lot. So please feel free to come hang out with us. But Corey, man, thanks again, brother. I love getting to chop it up with you anytime I can.
No, the pleasure is all mine. As Steven said, make sure that you are tapped into the No Ceilings YouTube, the No Ceilings podcast feed, NoCeilingsNBA.com. You can follow me at Corey Teleba on Twitter /X. And look, man, we're about to hit our stride here. March is quickly approaching, faster than we can anticipate. And, NoCeilingsNBA.com is the spot for all of your NBA draft and even some of your NBA development needs. So stay locked in. We appreciate everybody rocking with us. We will see you next time. We out. Peace.